Good morning, everyone, and welcome to Canadian History 12-2. We're going to continue our study of the residential school system here in Canada. We started that the other day, and we looked at the topic of apology. So first of all, let's just go over what we learned in the last lesson. And I just have a little board here for you so that we can review. So the residential school system in Canada, it began in 1831, and that was the first school, and that was the Mohawk School in Brantford, Ontario. And the last school closed in 1996. And at its peak, there were 17,000 students. And this was to solve the quote-unquote Indian problem, which was to be accomplished by assimilation and integration. And at its peak, there were 80 schools, and that was in the 1930s. And one of the main characters in all this was Duncan Campbell Scott, and he was the Deputy Minister of Indian Affairs. And in 1920, he mandated that all Indian children between the ages of 5 and 17 would have to attend residential schools. So we're going to go on and delve into that a little bit, and you're going to find everything that I am telling you today and showing you today on Flipgrid, and I will be sending that to you via your school email. So we'll go over that a little bit later. Okay, so we talked about the apology that Stephen Harper, the Prime Minister of Canada, gave to the Indigenous peoples of Canada, the First Nations, Métis, and Inuit peoples of Canada in 2008, and that was on June the 11th in the House of Commons, and that was broadcast live across Canada. And at the time, it was quite a big sensation because they had never been apologized for that, for the egregious things that had happened to the children of the Indigenous people at that time. So we watched a little bit of it on YouTube, and I had asked you to watch the rest of it on YouTube. It's 8 minutes and 30 seconds in total. If you haven't, I've linked that also in the Flipgrid, and you can look at it there. So just another little board here for you. So we watched Stephen Harper, and one of the questions you have to ask when you look at things that are an apology is the sincerity. Did you think he was sincere, or did you think he was not? And what was the government sorry for, and what did the Aboriginal leaders say in response? So these are the kind of things I want you to think about if you've seen the whole thing, or if you haven't seen it, to have a look at it and ask those questions to yourself. So what we're going to do next is we're going to look at a paper, and it's going to be a paper that I want you to look at as a critical reading. And being in grade 12, some of you are going to be going on to university, and even those who aren't, when you read newspaper articles or you hear people give opinion pieces maybe on the radio or on TV or on a podcast, you have to critically think about what they are saying, and if they're giving evidence that you believe to be true, or you believe supports or refutes what they're saying. These are techniques that you need to learn. So we're going to look at this paper, and it's called Pardon Me for Breathing, which sounds kind of sarcastic, doesn't it? Yes, it does to me too. But it's 7 types of apologies. So I thought that was a good paper for today, and that is also linked in the Flipgrid. So what do we look at when we're looking for critical reading? Well, in this paper, in the critical reading, things like, they're talking about saying things like, excuse me, please forgive me, I beg your pardon, I apologize, I'm sorry. And so what do we mean when we say we're sorry? Have you changed your mind about what Stephen Harper said? Is he sincere now, in your opinion, or is he not sincere? So these are the kind of things that we're going to look at as we look at this paper. So critical reading, these are the things I want you to do. Okay, so critical reading, you have to think, you have to slow down and think. What I want you to do is to take each paragraph and slowly look at it. Jot down a note maybe in the margin if you print it off, or on a piece of paper, put a sticky note or jot some notes down. Trying to find the main idea of that paragraph, or trying to find some evidence or something that the author is trying to refute in that paragraph. And by putting all of this and reading all of your notes in the end, you should be able to figure out what the main idea is. And what the main idea is should be able to connect with everything that you have written down. Okay, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to model for you how I would look at a paper and critically read it. And the paper I have for you is for me to model for you is called Understanding Racial Prejudice. So you can also find the link to that, and if you want to stop the video right now, you can go and get that opened up so you can follow along as I read and see where I put little notes in my paragraphs. All right, so I'll let you do that. All right, welcome back. All right, so Understanding Racial Prejudice, and this is written by Nedra Karim Niddle, and it was published in July of 2018. So Understanding Racial Prejudice, and this is from thought.co.com, and you'll find the website link to this in the top right corner of the article. So words such as racism, prejudice, and stereotype are often used interchangeably. While the definitions of these overlap, they actually mean different things. Racial prejudice, for instance, typically arises from race-based stereotypes. People of influence who prejudge others set the stage for institutional racism to occur. How does this happen? This overview of what racial prejudice is, why it's dangerous, and how to combat racial prejudice explains in detail. So from this paragraph, I think I would write down, people use these words interchangeably, and we hear that a lot in the press and in newsprint, and just people talking about these things amongst themselves. But they actually mean different things. So this article is telling me that I'm going to have to be careful. I need to pay attention to what each of these words means so I can use them appropriately. And also the other thing I see here is institutional racism can occur. So institutional racism is racism you'll find that permeates through governments or permeates through universities, things that are institutions, things, for example, banks, things like that. So always remember to put this in your own words, not in the author's words. All right. It's difficult to discuss prejudice without clarifying what it is. The 4th edition of the American Heritage College Dictionary provides 4 meanings. So already I'm seeing there's 4 meanings, so already we can be confused and we can use the term in different ways. From an adverse judgment or opinion formed beforehand or without knowledge or examination of the facts, to an irrational suspicion or hatred of a particular group, race, or religion. Both definitions apply to the experiences of ethnic minorities in Western society. Of course, the second definition sounds much more menacing than the first, but prejudice in either capacity has the potential to cause a great deal of damage. Likely because of his skin color, English professor and writer Mustafa Bayami says that strangers often ask him, "Where are you from?" When he answers that he was born in Switzerland, grew up in Canada, and now lives in Brooklyn, he raises eyebrows. Why? Because people doing the questioning have a preconceived idea about what Westerners generally, and Americans particularly, look like. They're operating under the erroneous assumption that natives of the United States don't have brown skin, black hair, or names that aren't English in origin. Bayami acknowledges that the people suspicious of him typically don't have any real malice in mind. Still, they allow prejudice to guide them. While Bayami, a successful author, has taken the questions about his identity in stride, others deeply resent being told that their ancestral origins make them less American than others. Prejudice of this nature may not only lead to psychological trauma, but also to racial discrimination. So here I'm saying, I'm inferring that Mustafa has brown skin, and that along with his name, it causes people to racially stereotype him. So how could he be a Native American, they're asking themselves. So this is what I'm asking myself. So I'm inferring this from this paragraph, and that's what you have to do when you're critically reading something. You have to infer things. You have to assume. So I'll read one more paragraph. When the Japanese attacked Pearl Harbor on December 7, 1941, the U.S. public viewed Americans of Japanese descent suspiciously. Although many Japanese Americans had never stepped foot in Japan and knew only of the country from their parents and grandparents, the notion that the Nisei, second-generation Japanese Americans, were more loyal to the Japanese Empire than to their birthplace, the United States. Acting with this idea in mind, the federal government decided to round up more than 110,000 Japanese Americans and place them in internment camps for fear they would team up with Japan to plot additional attacks against the United States. No evidence suggested Americans would commit treason. Japanese Americans would commit treason against the U.S. and join forces with Japan. Without trial or due process, the Nisei were stripped of their civil liberties and forced into detention camps. The case of the Japanese American internment is one of the most egregious cases of racial prejudice leading to institutional racism. In 1988, the U.S. government issued a formal apology to Japanese Americans for this shameful chapter in history. So here I'm looking here and I'm saying it's an irrational suspicion. There's no evidence that it's racial prejudice. And I've written down that this is institutional prejudice. This is what we talked about in the first paragraph, that this is what we call institutional prejudice. So these are the things that I'd like you to do while you're writing yours. You can see I wrote some notes on that page, and there's some notes written here as well. And then you go back through and you can find your main idea. So that was the modeling of the prejudice piece. And I want you to do the same thing with your critical reading. Also on the Flipgrid, I've linked a website for a podcast called Making the Call. It's very interesting. The question they ask are, why are Black people dying of COVID-19 more than other people in the United States, and can we solve this problem? And it's very interesting, and if you have time, I'd like you to listen to that. Now on Flipgrid, there's a video response that I'd like you to give me. And I'd like you to share your feelings about injustices. Especially injustices that are still felt today. Your response can be anything at all. It can be in the form of a song, a spoken word, poetry, art, dance, anything you'd like. If you'd like to draw something and project that and then tell me about your drawing, that would be fine as well. So you'll find all of this on Flipgrid. If you have any problems, you can email me, and you have my email address. Dawn, D-A-W-N, .e.mcniven, M-C-N-I-V-E-N, @gmail.com. I thank you very much, and I hope you guys have a great week, and I'll speak to you on video next week. Thank you. Goodbye. Have a great week.